Imagine booting into your favorite Linux distro, clicking an icon on your desktop, and watching a full-fledged Windows application open instantly, smoothly, and without any virtual machine, dual boot, or complicated setup. No Windows license running in the background, no heavy emulation layer slowing things down, no awkward workarounds, just Linux, doing Linux things, while Windows apps behave like they were always meant to be there. For years, this idea has lived somewhere between wishful thinking and clickbait headlines, but now Linux has reached a point where the experience is so close to native that it genuinely changes how people think about switching away from Windows. To understand why this feels like such a big deal, you have to remember what the biggest barrier to Linux adoption has always been. It's not performance, because Linux has been fast for decades. It's not stability, because Linux servers literally run the internet. It's not even gaming anymore, because Proton and Steam have mostly taken care of that. The real wall has always been applications. People rely on specific Windows-only software for work, school, or hobbies, and telling them to just use an alternative has never been a satisfying answer. Alternatives are great, but habits, workflows, and file compatibility matter. When your entire career depends on one app, switching operating systems becomes risky. For a long time, the only serious options were dual booting, which is inconvenient and breaks your workflow, or virtual machines, which are heavy, resource-hungry, and feel disconnected from your main system. Then there was Wine, a compatibility layer that's been around forever and has slowly, painfully improved. Wine was always impressive, but also inconsistent. One app would run perfectly, another would crash on launch, and a third would require a ritual of obscure tweaks and registry hacks just to get past the installer. It worked, but it didn't feel like the future. Fast forward to now, and something important has changed. Instead of being a nerdy experiment for power users, Windows app compatibility on Linux has quietly matured into something polished, fast, and shockingly reliable. Thanks to massive improvements in Wine itself, Valve's work on Proton, better graphics drivers, Wayland support, containerization, and tighter desktop integration, Windows apps can now feel almost native. In many cases, they start faster than they do on Windows, use fewer system resources, and integrate cleanly with Linux desktops as if they were built for them. The key idea here is that Linux isn't emulating Windows. There's no fake CPU, no translated instructions grinding performance into dust. What's happening instead is that Windows APIs are being re-implemented directly on top of Linux. When a Windows app asks the system to do something, that request is translated into native Linux calls. The code still runs directly on your CPU, which is why performance can be so good. This approach has been refined for years, but only recently has it reached a level where regular users can actually benefit from it without feeling like beta testers. One of the biggest breakthroughs came from gaming. Surprisingly, Valve had a selfish reason to make Windows games run well on Linux. They wanted Steam Deck to succeed, and the Steam Deck runs Linux. To make that happen, Proton was born. Proton is basically Wine on steroids, combined with custom patches, DXVK, VKD, 3D, and countless optimizations specifically designed to handle modern Windows software. Once Proton started handling DirectX 11 and DirectX 12 games with near-native performance, people realized something important. If this works for massive, complex games, why not for productivity apps too? That realization sparked a wave of development, focused on making Windows applications feel first-class on Linux desktops. Suddenly, it wasn't just about launching an EXF file and hoping for the best. It became about proper window behavior, correct scaling on high DPI displays, seamless clipboard sharing, file dialogues that look native, drag-and-drop support, system tray icons that actually work, and audio that doesn't randomly break. All the little details that turn it runs into it, feels right. Today, you can install certain Windows apps on Linux, and they show up in your application menu just like any native program. You can pin them to your taskbar, assign keyboard shortcuts, and Alt-tab between them and native Linux apps without thinking about it. They can access your home folder, respect your system theme, and even use Wayland features like fractional scaling. For many users, the illusion is complete. They forget they're running a Windows app at all. This is why people are starting to say that Windows apps now run natively on Linux, even if that phrase isn't technically perfect. From a user perspective, native doesn't mean the source code was compiled specifically for Linux. It means the app launches instantly, performs well, doesn't crash randomly, and integrates with the system. And in that sense, Linux has crossed a major threshold. Another factor that makes this moment feel different is how accessible everything has become. You no longer need to spend hours reading forum posts and experimenting with random settings. Tools like Bottles, Lutris, and Steam itself provide clean graphical interfaces for managing Windows apps. They let you create isolated environments with specific versions of Wine, DXVK, and other components, so one app's weird requirements don't break everything else. You click a button, install your app, and start using it. Some Linux distributions have even started embracing this reality directly. Instead of pretending Windows compatibility doesn't exist, they integrate it into their ecosystem. You'll see official documentation explaining how to run popular Windows software, curated lists of apps that work perfectly, and even pre-configured setups for common use cases like Adobe apps, Microsoft Office, or specialized business software. This is a huge shift in mindset. Linux isn't saying replace your workflow. It's saying bring your workflow with you. Performance is another reason this feels like a game changer. On modern hardware, many Windows apps actually run faster on Linux than on Windows. That sounds insane until you remember how heavy Windows has become over the years. Background services, telemetry, update checks, and layered legacy components all add overhead. Linux, by contrast, is lean. When a Windows app runs through a compatibility layer on top of Linux, it often benefits from that efficiency. Disk access can be faster, memory management can be cleaner, and CPU scheduling can be more predictable. Of course, this doesn't mean every Windows app works perfectly. Kernel-level anti-cheat software, deeply integrated drivers, and some copy protection systems still cause problems. Certain professional tools with heavy hardware dependencies can be hit or miss. But the list of unsupported software is shrinking, not growing. Each year, more apps cross the line from kind of works to works flawlessly. What makes this especially exciting is what it means for the future of operating systems. For decades, Windows has held users hostage through application lock-in. You might hate the interface, the updates, or the performance, but you stay because you need the software. Linux, breaking that lock is a huge deal. It means your choice of operating system can finally be about preference instead of necessity. Developers are paying attention to some Windows software companies, seeing how well their apps run on Linux through compatibility layers, are quietly optimizing for it. They might not officially support Linux, but they avoid doing things that break compatibility. Others are taking the next step and offering native Linux versions, knowing there's now a real user base waiting for them. The irony is delicious. Better Windows compatibility on Linux is actually helping Linux native apps exist. There's also a psychological shift happening. People who would never consider Linux before are now experimenting with it because the risk is lower. If your favorite Windows app works just fine, why not try a faster, more customizable, more private operating system? Once people make that jump, they often discover native Linux alternatives they actually like better. Over time, their dependence on Windows apps decreases naturally, without forcing anything. From a content creator or YouTuber perspective, this is gold. You can show real demos, not theoretical promises. You can install a Windows app live on a Linux system and show it working smoothly. You can compare performance side by side. You can challenge the old myths about Linux being only for programmers or not ready for real work. The footage speaks for itself. Another subtle but important detail is how this affects older software. Windows has a habit of breaking compatibility with its own past. An app that worked perfectly on Windows 7 might struggle or fail on Windows 11. Linux, through compatibility layers, can sometimes preserve that older software better than Windows itself. This is huge for businesses and individuals who rely on legacy tools. Linux becomes not just an alternative, but a safe harbor for software history. Security and privacy also enter the conversation. Running Windows apps on Linux doesn't automatically make them secure, but it does give users more control. You can sandbox applications, restrict their access to the system, and prevent them from phoning home as easily. You're no longer forced to accept whatever Windows decides is best for you. You own the environment. This doesn't mean Linux is trying to replace Windows by becoming Windows. It's doing the opposite. Linux stays Linux, with all its strengths, openness, and flexibility, while gaining the ability to run Windows software as a bonus. That balance is what makes this moment special. It's not about abandoning Linux values, but about removing unnecessary barriers. Looking ahead, it's easy to imagine where this could go. better Wayland integration, improved HDR support, more consistent controller and input handling, and even tighter desktop integration could make the experience indistinguishable from native apps for most users. We might reach a point where asking whether an app is Windows only feels outdated. It just runs, and that's all that matters. So when people say Linux just got a feature that changes everything, they're not exaggerating as much as it might sound. It's not a single button or a flashy announcement. It's the cumulative result of years of development finally reaching critical mass. Windows apps running natively on Linux, or close enough that it no longer matters, represents freedom. Freedom to choose your operating system without sacrificing your workflow. Freedom to escape bloated systems and forced updates. Freedom to experiment. For the first time in a long time, the question isn't, can Linux replace Windows? The question is, why wouldn't you at least try Linux now? Because the old excuses are disappearing, one Windows app at a time.